Well, hello there. You're very welcome to another Music at Madden's, coming to you from the Snug upstairs in Madden's Bar in the heart of Belfast City. This is the home of traditional music in Belfast, and we would love you to like, subscribe, comment on the podcast if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening on Spotify and Apple. So every week we drop on Mondays and bring you a conversation with people who are members of the traditional music community. So who is in the Snug this week? This week we have a County Down man, now resident in Antrim, bringing a stage show to Flackhole in the Heron for 2 nights in the Empire. Mind you, not many tickets left at this point. Ryan McMullen, you're very, very welcome. How are you?
Thanks for having me. I'm all right, I had a few pints last night, which I don't really do anymore, so you have a wee bit of a head on me, but other than that, I'm all right.
Okay, maybe her or the dog on the way up coming after this podcast today, shall we see?
Yeah, God, I'm more afraid of it than I am the hangover, to be honest.
But those days are gone now because you've got 2 wee girls.
Yeah. No, there's no drinking anymore. It's too hard to keep up. I'm getting old. It's too hard to drink.
It's not that. I think it's just too hard whenever there's maybe a wee knock on the door at 6 o'clock in the morning and
you
have to be on.
They have to go to their grandparents if I'm having a pint like it.
Yeah.
You need 2 days to recover after that.
Yeah, I totally get it. So life has changed a lot for you lately.
Oh yeah, it's been life's always a whirlwind kind of thing, but this past 2 years has felt like 10 years, but flashed by in about what feels like 2 weeks. We'd moved out of Belfast, which I never thought I would ever do, and it's just like slower pace is kind of the way forward, I think, for me, for now anyway.
Okay, it's working for you.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'm writing more than I've ever been writing, which is great. I don't feel rushed to release music. I feel like for once it's sort of on my time. It's just nice.
See that idea of it not being in a rush or other people not pressuring you into writing music, releasing music, recording music. Is there a power that comes with that? Like, do you feel like you've even got more agency on what you're writing now?
Yeah, I mean, I always struggled with the pressure of it all. Like, I don't mind pressure, but I struggled with this idea of like, you have to be right. And I was like, I can't, that's not really me. Because you get to a point and you're kind of like, well, I've nothing else to write about because all I've done is the thing. Mm-hmm. So I'm either going to just write the same song again or...
You need to live a bit?
A wee bit, yeah. So when all of the sort of pressures of like that went away, I just started writing again this year whenever we moved, and it worked. And then the next day, and it worked. And it was like, oh, this is kind of really enjoyable. Like, what will I write tomorrow? It's just the first time I've ever sort of gained that kind of scope. And I'm just loving it, to be honest. It'll dry up, I'm sure. It can't just keep going and going and going. It'll come in cycles, but like for now, I'm happy, you know.
Yeah, and just enjoy it.
Yeah.
But there was a while there in your career, Ryan, where you seemed to be like the shiny thing that everybody wanted a part of, wanted a piece of. And I can't imagine how noisy that must have been, where there must have been an awful lot of voices, advice. You go this direction, go that direction. You need to do this, you need to do that.
Yeah.
So being in this position now is just the opposite of all of that.
Well, my gut, I mean, everybody says go with your gut. And my gut was screaming at me every day, like anxiety and stuff like that. Just, you're going through the motions and everything's great and it all feels like everybody's lovely and everything, but your gut's screaming at you going, there's something up. You're not like fully in here. Whereas now my gut is quiet and sound, and I feel, I mean, who knows, maybe it's nice to sort of have that bit of an edge sort of feeling of like keep going. It's maybe considered a bit of drive, but to me it kind of just felt a wee bit of like something's not 100% here. I need to kind of figure this out and like come back at it on my terms, which is kind of what I'm doing now. And I'm so excited for like releasing music again and doing some shows and just feeling like it's my thing and not just this thing that's, could go anywhere. Or if I do it their way, it'll go that way. And if I do it their way, it'll go this way. It's just like, I kind of just want to do it my way. And if it works out, great. Like,
yeah, there's a lot of that. If you're in the middle of something like that, where people are, really latching onto you and recognize your talent now, for starters, which is great because you have a supreme talent. But then they're telling you, no, you need to do this. You have to. And if you don't do this now, you're going to miss out.
Yeah.
And something inside you's going, no, but that's not right for me right now. But it's very hard to talk against that when you're thinking, I'm going to miss an opportunity here.
Yeah, and like you're going against a wee bit of experience. You know, you're kind of using, well, they done
know
this before. They're experienced in this world.
Yeah.
And that's 100% true, you know, but it I don't know, it's horses for courses kind of thing. And I guess I just needed to slow down and go, what am I doing? Like, what am I trying to say with my music here? Because currently I'm just saying anything, and I would rather just say something, you know. That's kind of where it's ended.
When did you find your voice in songwriting? When did you start writing songs?
Do you know what? This story's kind of like, whenever we were growing up, I was in a band and like we were trying to write songs and stuff. But the first time I truly started writing music, I watched a video of Foy. He was singing a song of his called Narrow Road. I was just watching it on YouTube. And you know the way music moves you?
Yeah.
It physically moved me. I physically got out of bed because of watching that video and started to try and write songs. And I can remember that sort of path. And then I kind of just, it was what it was. I let it be what it was. And then sure, I met Foy on a tour. And then he asked me to sing one of mine. And I didn't have anything. And it was like, oh, I really respect this guy. And he's wanting to speak a language and I can't speak it. So then I went back and wrote an EP. And then lo and behold, he ended up at the gig not knowing it was the same guy. And then he took me on tour, and then that was kind of the start of it, you know. Mm-hmm. But yeah, the first time I can remember it, like I can remember physically moving and going and getting my guitar and being like, right, try and figure out what this is. So that was quite late on. I was at university, so like I was 20.
Yeah, but the guitar was there, and obviously music's always been there as well. If you were in a band and that.
Singing and stuff for sure. Like we were cover band, and like my mum's a great singer, my dad's a great like performer and stuff. So music was just around the house all the time. Like, yeah, like if you were washing dishes, it'd be weird if you weren't singing, kind of thing. You know, that kind of way of life. Like it would never be silent. So performing was always like a love, but then trying to like create something that might touch people the way all them cover songs, you know, connect with people. That was just kind of can I do that? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, and it's a massive bridge to take on sometimes, because there's a comfort in the cover songs.
Oh yeah,
they're a comfort blanket. Whenever you throw in one of your own, you know, you're waiting on it to either fly or fall and sink or swim, and even those couple of minutes waiting on an audience to respond to something you've written because you're putting yourself out there is terrifying.
It is, and like I don't really get nervous performing or anything like that, but there is moments where, like, say you're doing a festival gig and it's not an audience that paid to see you, they're just at the festival, and a lot of the people maybe don't know your songs. I always have Bruce Springsteen's I'm on Fire at the ready, because it always kind of calms me. It like settles me, and I think it kind of creates an understanding of like, okay, well, if he's playing that song then and I like that song, then he's given me one, so now I can take one of his, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the comfort is always in the cover songs for sure, but so, you know, I've kind of got to this point where a couple of my songs has connected with people, and it's that connection is incredible, because you're hearing people talk about like letting go for a little while and what it means to them, and you're like, I did it. I wrote a song that people are truly connecting with. It's that, and then that's infectious. You're like, can I do it again?
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So
but then just that there's a lot of pressure in that too, but trying to follow up something and trying to chase an emotion and chase that too. Mm-hmm. I'm just thinking you're talking about I'm on Fire. Mm-hmm. Whoever's ringing them bells is on fire this morning,
God,
aren't
yes,
they?
Yeah.
There we are. Oh, hang on. And it's just when you think they've stopped, they go again.
They go again.
But is that an emotion you chase then? Kind of that, because that's adrenaline. Whenever you know you've made a connection with someone, and it's like any performance, and there's always a come down from it, and then you're on to chase the thing again, and so the cycle continues.
Yeah, I think so. I think the problem is if you start chasing it for it rather than like actually creating it for you and then it connecting.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely tried that. Like there's songs that I've released and I've been like, in retrospect of it all, I'm like, you were trying to connect, but you it didn't come from.
The initial connection hadn't been made.
The truth of it wasn't there.
Yeah.
Like the instance of truth that creates songs wasn't there.
Yeah.
It was manufactured, and that's why it didn't connect, because it's fabricated, you know. Whereas Letting Go for a Little While, as one of them, that I just feel like it came from such a truthful perspective point that it was easy for people to come into it. Yeah, it's so hard. So it's incredible. Like trying to just connect with someone in that way is it's incredible when you get it right. Like,
yeah.
But
you have done, like, because you know you were one of these artists for a number of years before you released your debut album, where you didn't really have to have much recorded or much released for audiences to flock to see you. And you know, you announced if you announced an Ulster Hall, it would sell out. You announced whatever gig, it would sell out without you having released very much music at all. So surely you recognise that the connection was there. You were doing it. You were successful with it.
Yeah, that whole, like the whole big journey going up, you know, from not doing it to doing it kind of thing. That was like such an incredible journey. I think the next part of it for me is like trying to understand like how far you want it to go, sort of thing. Because at one point I was like, I could maybe do like the arena, and then it's like, would you go to me? Like, would I myself want to go and see me in an arena? And it was like, well, you have to then, am I creating a show for that sort of thing? And it was like, oh, I'd kind of rather see me in a pub a wee bit, you know? So I know what you mean, but I suppose I'm just grateful that people ever listened to anything that you sort of do, but it's hard to sort of articulate it, I think.
But I'm loving that grounded thing you have there, you know, of really asking yourself the big questions, going, but hang on a minute here, roll back, step back, big lad.
Yeah.
You know, what's the truth of the situation here?
Yeah.
Because at a point in your career, you had, you know, Five Ants had taken you under his wing. Elton John was telling you you're fantastic. You had Ed Sheeran on board as well. You were touring with Ed Sheeran as well, and all these big voices, and these are big champions to have at a very early stage in your career, who are telling you you're deadly, and you were like, but yet you're still trying to keep yourself in check.
I think it was just more of it's probably just what we do as Irish people too, but I think it was just, like, I'm sure part of it was don't get too big for your boots, because if you don't get there, you have to deal with that, you know?
Yeah.
But then the other side of it is just sometimes music doesn't have to be played in front of thousands and thousands of people. Like, sometimes music is just perfect for the situation that it's in, and not to kind of push it into this big realm for the sake of, like, whether it be money or just like just the whole fame of it all or whatever. I don't know. There's just like the songs I'm writing now, I'd rather hear them in a pub than hear them in an arena, you know.
What did you learn from being in those arenas? Because like you toured with Ed Sheeran, you were on supporting him and walking out in front of like ridiculous crowds, 80,000 people on a regular basis, night after night.
Yeah, I mean, it was so infectious, like that adrenaline rush and all that. But then you start to understand it's not your thing. That's Ed's thing. That's his world, and you're just lucky to be a part of it. But then it makes you go, well, but what's your world going to be? And then you start to dream about what your world's going to be, and you certainly, like, I did think about how amazing it would be to do like an arena sort of thing, and then ultimately, even just playing in the likes of the Ulster Hall, anywhere at all, people singing the songs that you've written back to you, that's at any level, that is the thing. Like, that's what'll get me in any stage. Like,
playing with Ed Sheeran also opened a door and opened a path to really strong relationships that you still have in music, namely with Bioga. You big mates, champions of yours, you champion them. It's a lovely relationship there, and I want to get to, you know, you playing the 2 nights at the Fla at the Empire, because I've known you for an awful long time, played your music on radio. I remember you handing me an EP that you'd made with Sean O'Graham years ago, and I can't remember. Like, I lost it to my face. And honest to God, I cried when I realised I'd lost it, because The Streets of New York was on it, and you had The Flower Maharali, and what were the other songs on it? I can't remember the other songs on it. But you'd recorded that with Soggy ages ago.
Yeah.
Way before I think you started recording any of your own material.
Yeah.
Talk me through that. Like, what was the motivation for recording that EP?
I think just the heritage of Irish music. I think at that time, you know, we're certainly seeing it today. Ireland music is top of the bill, and it's always had a quality. But right now, the world wants it all.
Yeah,
you know, it seems to just be at the forefront. But back then, it makes it sound like it was like forever ago. I suppose it was. It was nearly 10 years ago, actually.
I was going to say, would it be maybe more? What?
Yeah, it might be actually. No, it definitely is more. It was 2015.
There you go.
My God.
There you go.
That's terrible to think about, or scary, not terrible, but I don't think Irish music was like anywhere close to where it is today in terms of like the worldwide scope of it all.
No.
And I love Irish music, and it was like I just kind of wanted to sing these songs. It wasn't about really, oh, look at me. It wasn't that. It was just like, I love these songs. Can I record them? And then once I recorded them, I was like, can I put this out? Would people care? But I really enjoyed kind of like, particularly the Flower of Maherally, because I didn't know that song. I'd actually said to Sean Og, I want to do, I can't remember what the song was now, but it must have been I'm going to say it was a Christy Moore song. And he just said, no, you're going to do the Flower of Maherally. Okay. And I was like, I don't understand why, but I think he just maybe wanted to hear me sing that song or something. And that just ended up being one of my favourites on that wee EP that it turned out to. I would love to actually hear them recordings. They're not even online or anything.
No, they're not. No, because I honestly, it was back to the days of CDs where I had the CD and it was in and out of the player in the car. So I've wrecked it. I wrecked the CD, number one, and then lost it. So, yeah.
I wonder if I could actually get the masters of that. That's terrible that I don't have that.
Forget me, but put the call into Sean straight after this. Yeah,
I'll try and get it online. So then, I mean, we don't need CDs anymore. So let's try and I'll figure that out. Actually, at least I'll get them to you. If I don't put them online, I'll get them.
Do you know what it is too? Because that version of the Streets, because I know you went on to release a live version of the Streets of New York, but there was something about that version on that EP that I thought was it was magic.
Right.
And then it became a thing at your live gigs years after that, after you had released the EP. But it was you kind of, it was the storytelling in Streets of New York for me. You could have been that young lad.
Yeah.
Do you know, it could have been you. Yeah. It was how you inhabited the song for me that really, really worked.
Yeah, that was a pure fluke. I was trying to write a song, and as I was playing them chords, the melody of Streets of New York came, and then I went, oh, this kind of sounds like,
oh, that's what it is.
And then I started playing it, and I was like, that's nice. That's like a nice way to play that song. Didn't think anybody would really care about it, but then I did a gig in Derry, and there was a guy filming it, and in that video did like just whenever viral wasn't a thing, it kind of did a thing on Facebook for a while, and I was like, okay, right, people really connected with this. But I couldn't even tell you what that EP one is like. I don't even know if I ever listened fully through
to it,
because that'd be weird in my head too. But I'll have to get it and have a listen and see if I can hear what you're talking about there.
But I think because whenever you started doing that live, it was a bit of a departure from your own music.
Yeah.
Encore, was that kind of quiet moment of the gig where you came on and did that. And again, you're right, like those videos did at that moment went viral for whatever viral meant.
Yeah.
Back in those days, I know we're only talking about 10 years ago, but still it does feel like an awful long time ago. But when you look now, fast forward to the likes of Amble, the Kingfishers, like all these bands who are doing exactly that sort of music. Like the appetite was there. There was like a latent kind of desire amongst audiences for this type of music, but it's always been part of you.
Yeah, I think it's part of us all, really. Like, it's our culture, it's our heritage. It's like, it would be great to see it continue to be at the forefront of the world, because some of the like Streets of New York is one of the best songs ever written. It's incredible. But yeah, I don't know, maybe, I think for me personally, the thing was always, like, I grew up on, like, Thin Lizzy and then on to the Beatles and stuff, so Irish music to me was this, like, joyful, like, part of heritage, and then this world was this kind of, like, really driving force for me. And then I kind of wanted to make sure that both was incorporated in the gig, and then I kind of got to a point where it's like, you need to go one way or the other here, because you can't. It's kind of hard to have an audience come for like Streets of New York, but then have to go through a set of non-traditionally sort of songs.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's also hard to do a lot of traditional songs and have people come for these. So it was I suppose I was trying to balance it out.
Yeah.
To the point where then it was like, I really have to like choose what way I'm going to go here. But I love playing like old folk songs from Ireland. They're untouchable. But also I'm also a wee bit terrified of like, I think if you're doing them, you have to do them justice, because like voices like Luke Kelly's, it's very hard if you're not going to do it right. For me anyway, if you're not going to do it right, don't touch it, because it's perfect. Like, so I suppose there's that responsibility to it too, and not taking it for granted.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
there's so much there, because you're saying basically you're struggling with the two worlds. You're falling between the two stools, really.
Yeah.
And then trying to cater to what you think an audience wants from you, but at the meantime, at the same time, trying to be true to yourself and present you in every way that you want to be presented. So, do you think now with these gigs that are coming up for the Fleadh, have you found where you really sit comfortably?
No, I'm trying really hard. The thing about the Fleadh shows is that I really want to embrace that part of me that I've not left it behind, but I've certainly had to steer it one way or the other, and I sort of steered this way. But with this, it's like I really want to celebrate that part of like music within me, you know. But after that, like I've got another album finished, and I'm about 20 songs deep into the next one, and even them are two different worlds from each other. So like I think for me it's always a constant battle of like, I just don't really want to be one thing.
Yeah.
But then that's kind of hard, because you're asking people to come for this thing and then you're giving them other stuff. So maybe I just have to maybe zone in a bit more to what it is.
This week's episode of Music at Madden's is brought to you by Madden's Bar itself, the home of trad in Belfast City, where you'll find live music 7 nights a week. And as well as that, let me tell you what other things go on here in Madden's. Wednesday night is dancing night, set dancing and step dancing. Thursday nights, it's Gaelic agus Pinty. Slow session on the first Monday of every month. There's a teenage session on the first Sunday of every month. Kids come as far as Dublin to take part in that session. We have the Sunday Song concerts upstairs here, where we record the podcast, on the first Sunday of every month. Uisce Bhfuil the Whiskey Club, is on the second Monday of every month. And of course, the Music at Madden's podcast, which is recorded here at least once a month. And the proceeds of the podcast go towards the Madden's Bursary Scheme, providing summer school scholarships for children and teenagers to music schools, festivals and Irish language courses in the Gaeltacht. So keep up to date. Follow Madden's Bar on socials, particularly Instagram and TikTok, and follow Music at Madden's as well for the crack. Well, tell me about these Fleadh shows. Mind you, we're talking about something and it seems a wee bit unfair because there's not many tickets left.
Yeah.
So we'll talk it up and then go, oh, actually, you can't go.
Yeah.
Because it's completely sold out, unless, Ryan, you put on another night in the Empire. But you're approaching these in a very particular way. So what is it you want to create? And I suppose, what experience do you want from these gigs?
I think the way I've been through, I actually heard Dermot Kennedy talking about this randomly. When you're doing shows, there's a lot goes into it that's all technical stuff, and like it's not very musical, but that's what you need to sort of do the shows or whatever. You don't need, but that for some reason that's just the way that I went about it and stuff. But I go to London to do a bit of writing here and there, and I was in the Devonshire, and on a Tuesday they have a trad sesh, it's a trad sesh, but then people get up and sing songs and whatever, and I was just like, like this is honest, like this is worth holding on to, sort of thing. And then I got up singing with them and chatting to them and stuff, and I was like, wouldn't it be good to just do, like, is there a way that I could reimagine my songs? Not like, they don't need crazy reimagination, but just to have killer players with a more traditional side, rather than going down the sort of pop thing, and just hear what the songs kind of sound like. So we ended up doing a couple of my songs, and I was like, I think more people should hear the songs this way. It does not for, how do I put it? It's like, I just think if you like my songs, I think you'd love to hear
these
them
versions
that way, you know, because as I was playing them, I was like, oh, this is just lovely. Like, it was just such a nice way to hear them. It's not forever, but it's certainly just, it doesn't, I don't know. They are such good players, and when I was playing with them, I was like, I want more people to hear this.
So who do you have in the band?
So Danny Ball is still playing keys. We have Orla McAuliffe. She's playing. Is it flute? Is it flute? Yeah. Jeez, that's bad. Like, I was kind of going, I want to call it a flute, but if I say this isn't a flute, I'm going to look even worse. But now I just feel silly. And Ronan Stewart, he's playing the fiddle. And then I haven't sorted a bodhrán player yet, but I'll get on to that.
So you might get onto that now because people will be going, Ryan, I'm available. You know, I can do it.
Yeah. Actually, or like, it's the Fly. Is anybody going to be available? You know, I'll have to get a stomp box. And
Yes, they are. They make themselves available for that lineup. So are you challenging yourself? So a few of your own songs reimagined. Yeah. Then some of the traditional stuff that you've done over the years as well. Yeah, I'm trying to decide on which songs to do for two reasons. One, I want to do songs that aren't just a standard, like, there's some incredible songs that doesn't really like the Flowers of Maher. I'm not going to play that because well, maybe I will. I would just have to get on that. I think you should.
I'll maybe have, I need to get them songs to hear, but just a few songs that I think like that really grabbed me. I'm a massive Paul Brady fan, and he is the hardest man to cover because he's so talented. And again, if you're not going to do it right, don't do it at all. So I'm literally rehearsing Paul Brady songs at the minute, flat out trying to see which one to. Interesting
you say Paul Brady, you know, because he started off with all the traditional stuff and then he went his own way and wrote his own stuff and brought in all different types of music. Like, everything was an experience with him. And just what a musician, what a songwriter.
I know, it's
as well.
Yeah,
there's a comparison there to be made. All right,
I've never thought of it that way, but now that you say it, it's like, oh, actually. That is a similarity sort of thing. Yeah, and the trajectory. Yeah, you can definitely say that. Yeah. I've never thought about that, but I totally understand what you're saying there.
Yeah, nothing but the same old story. Get onto that one. What a song!
I saw him playing in the Grand Opera House, and it was just one microphone, and it was like it was all about his dynamic and how he leaned into it. It was so incredible, and I just remember being like, why is anybody else trying? Like, he's just come to this gig and you've captured it, you know. It's phenomenal.
And would you say, you know, you learn from people like that whenever you're watching them, you're modelling yourself on them too? Because, you know, there's a lot of, like you say, the similarities are there. You could, the voice is there, but the guitar playing's there at the same time. There's an awful lot going on.
Yeah, I mean, I try and take inspiration everywhere, but I suppose the thing you don't want to do, which I know I've done a few times, is kind of take inspiration and then find yourself almost in a copycat situation.
Yeah.
You kind of lean into it too far and then you're just like a bad version of the thing.
Yes.
So it's kind of trying to take inspiration without being
that it peppers who you are.
Yourself. Yeah,
and it's enhancing almost that version of yourself as well. Well, that said, right, so when it came to redesign your album, there's a great story there with Sean O'Graham and Niamh Dunn and how, I suppose, central they became to you and redesign and this whole album. So meeting Beoga and them and becoming friends with them, how has that changed your music, or how has that kind of, I suppose, molded you into the person you are now, the musician you are now?
Beoga intimidate me with how good they are. Like,
and they carry it really lightly.
Oh my goodness, they just walk about like, that's just a bit of crack. And it's like, but you are so talented that it's like, being in the room with you is intimidating, because if you start and then I have to join in, it's like, I'm not gonna add to that. You are too good here. It's the same as like with Foy. He's so talented. You kind of want to be going before these people, because when they go, it's kind of hard to follow them. But with Beoga, it was that sense of just musicality. Their choices in even where they go. Like, there's a lot of times I would kind of go, well, I would naturally go here and they would go somewhere else, and you're like, wow, I wouldn't have even thought about that. But then when it came to redesign, Sean Og he's just a genius. You know, he's a phenomenal player, but in the studio he's also incredibly talented. But he was just helping me out because I was trying to figure it out, and then we started writing to see if we could do something for Bheoga, and then we wrote Real Love, and I couldn't get it out of my head. I was like, is there a way I can ask them, can I have that one, without it sounding cheeky, because they brought me in to write for Bheoga, and now I'm going, can I have it? But they were just like, yeah, of course. Like,
so this is the duet. You ended up performing it as a duet with Niamh Dunn. Like, it's your voices, energy, everything. You were made to perform together. Yeah. It's fabulous. And the song itself is deadly as well.
But I'm pretty sure at the time Niamh was like, so who are we going to get to sing this part, you know, that she had just done? And I was like, you like, this is, I wouldn't change this to be anybody else. And then she was like, oh, okay, right. Like, I think she was singing it to just demo it kind of thing. And I was like, no, like, that's perfect. Like, we don't need a name here. This is, you're the name. Your voice is incredible. And also because Niamh, I know that she does sing with Bheoga. I would like her to sing a wee bit more because I think she's incredible, you know. But yeah, it's that thing of like, no, please sing more. Like, you've got a serious voice there too.
I think it's just the finding the time as well. I think with everything else, but hopefully that'll come. So when it came to redesign then and working, you know, with Sean Og on that album, and you know, you putting yourself out there in an album form for the first time, what did you want to get out of it?
I don't really. So, album is sort of God in the world. It's like, if you're an artist, you have an album, and that tells you more than what a single will. The single's kind of the front door of the house that attracts you into the house or whatever. But for me, the album is what true artists do. And at that time, there was this rise, and it's still sort of there, but like singles is king, and like just song at a time. And I just wanted to sort of dip my toe into like finally creating an album. But it was so disjointed to try and write it because I was constantly doing shows and on tour, and I just really struggled with, I want to release an album, but I can't seem to find the time to do it. So it just kind of kept, I don't know, it just kept seeming like this thing that was too far out of reach, and I was never going to get it. So then by the time I like got it together, I was like, right, let's go. And then COVID happened. So then it was like, freak's sake, like I think I've got this thing, and now I've lost all momentum. And the COVID thing was weird. Like, I hate sort of
bringing it up again.
But it was this weird thing of like, what are we doing? And that kind of sucked a lot of the life out of everything for me a wee bit musically. But yeah, the redesign thing was just trying to be like the artists that I am inspired by. They create albums. And, you know, it was just kind of the beginning of, I want to be an album artist and not just the singles thing. But the whole thing was just this journey of like, can I get it together? Whereas the next album very much has a bit of a thread to it. You know, it feels a bit more. Maybe it's just because it's newer to me. You know, maybe that's the thing. Because
fresher.
Redesign, I've been touring it for six years. You know, it's kind of like, you know what songs I'm going to sing at the shows, kind of thing.
But then whenever you got it done, and Redesign was such a great title too. And looking back, you must really congratulate yourself on that one, because like, it was a redesign of your music, but it was a redesign of your mind, your career, your attitude, your mindset. Yeah, it was almost like it was redesigned in every single way. Yeah,
and like, weirdly, some of the songs in that in retrospect is crazy. Like, some of the songs, not to sort of delve in, I hate explaining songs. I think if I tell people the story of a song, it's like showing a deck of cards. If I tell you to pick a card out of a 52 card deck, and then I say, guess what it is, you've 52 opportunities. Whereas if you pick a card and I go, it's a 4 of clubs, what is it? And you said, well, now we know what it is. So it takes a wee bit of the mystery.
Magic away.
Yeah. But there's some songs on it that whenever I like look at the lyrics, I'm like, wow, you wrote this then, but it actually makes more sense now, which is a nice thing to sort of. It made me reconnect with the album.
That's the sign of a good song.
Yeah, okay.
When it means one thing in that particular moment, and then when you go back to it, it can mean something completely different.
Yeah.
Because life changes.
Yeah.
Of course, things speak to you in different ways.
Yeah.
And that's what it's supposed to do.
Yeah.
And I think, like, you know, for that album then to be, that was you chasing the dream. You got there. It was released. All the rest of it. You know, what do you think the industry doesn't put on a poster, you know, for those who are chasing that dream?
So I think it's all really changed. The whole narrative now is like, how many TikTok followers do you have? It's like, that's before you've heard a song kind of thing. I always think about.
Do you do that? Do you do TikTok? Can you be bothered with it?
No, I would love to be able to do more of it, but I just don't have that thing. It's the same as like, you're not going to come to my gig and see me dance on a stage. As much as I would love to do that for you, it's not innately me. So if I am doing it, you will bet that I'm being forced to, you know, like.
Yeah.
But it has all changed. The only thing that hasn't changed is you just have to do it. That's the big thing. The way you go about it now is maybe slightly different, but if you're not doing it, you can't expect to do it. You know, like Seth Rogen, didn't he say that thing of like, if you quit, you're definitely not going to make it, but if you don't quit, you might.
There's always a chance.
But yeah, I struggle trying to give people advice because I'm really sort of clueless. But I think if you're just committed to doing it, you'll be all right. Like,
it's just kind of just keep showing up.
100%. Yeah, I think if you, that it has all changed. Like whenever I was on starting out, it was like, do as many gigs as you can because you never know who's going to end up coming to one. Whereas now it's like, do a TikTok every day because you never know whose feed it's going to appear on. You know, was that not a thing? I'm totally pulling this out of the air here, so if this is not true, I'm sorry. But did Amble, was it not like whenever they got signed, it was because like the head of Warner in LA, it just popped up on his feed or something, and he was like, "Who's this? This is amazing." And you go, "Wow!" Okay. And then he wanted to meet them, kind of thing. That could be total lies, and I'm sorry if it is.
I'm not sure, to be honest. I don't know, but I suppose it is that thing. If you don't put yourself out there, you're never going to know. And it's huge trying to find a place where you're comfortable doing that, or a place that sits comfortably with you. Because it's not for everybody.
No, and like, I think I've been doing it long enough now to know that if I'm doing a gig in a pub and people are there to listen, we're all gonna have like the time that we're going to have, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's
speaking of the pub, you know, and finding that corner and all the rest of it. When you think about the Fla coming to Belfast now in August, I know you've got your gigs in the Empire. But how do you see yourself spending the rest of the week?
I'm going to try and see as much. I don't really get to see much gigs at the minute, so I'm going to try and just take in as much music as I can. But also, I've never been to a Fla, so I kind of just want to experience it all. But I'm also just really interested to see it in Belfast. I think it's so incredible that it's happening in Belfast. True sign of the times, really. So I'm just sort of trying to take as much as I can in, but I'm sure there's going to be lots of wee surprises here, there, and everywhere. So if you can kind of stumble upon one, that's going to be great, you know, just to fluke into a moment of like, what is happening here?
Yeah.
That's the unknown is probably what I'm most excited about the Fla.
The Fla, yeah. I think, but sure, that's the magic of it, isn't it? Yeah. That you're walking around a corner and you could just happen upon the most amazing session, amazing musicians that you've seen, you know, in a very long time. And I think that's what it's all about. Never mind the big live gigs, which are going to be fantastic as well. And we've so many of them, and it's great to see you on the stage of the Empire, which is most definitely one of our best music venues in this city. There's no other venue like it for a vibe. Yeah, it's just going to be, those are going to be two amazing nights. You must be so excited about it.
Yeah, I'm so excited to perform, especially with them players. It's going to be, like, for me, it's going to be, like, I'm going to be buzzing to be playing there. You know, it's very much, I'm trying to, like, I know that what's going to happen is that I'm going to play and kind of be like too busy staring at like what everybody else is doing, being like, wow, and then it's like, oh frick, I need to the verse is coming up here.
So that's all right. You can have a bit of a session on the stage. So you'll get away with it more at the Fla than you will anywhere else. Yeah. So if you're just jamming, that's absolutely fine. That'll be 100%. Right. And come here. So with all that and all the music in mind, where does hurling come into life at the minute?
Yeah, we've just moved up to Antrim and playing for a team up there, and they're a senior team, and I'm 36 now, so it's tough. One of the players isn't even half my age; he's younger than that. He's not even he's 20 years younger than me, and you're just kind of really quickly realizing that you're getting old here. But hurling has been in my life my whole. It's the best sport in the world. I wish that, well, it's one of them things I wish the world would know about it, but also not too much, because it's so it's so inherently ours. I love playing it. It's such a good headspace, but also it's just class,
Is it true that you went to training the night coming home after a European tour or something? Did you make it to training? Is there a story there about you wanting to just...
I played a match. I came home...
You played a match?
Yeah. I came on the second half. Was it Europe? I must have been. I came home, grabbed my mate brought my gear, and I jumped over the fence, put on my boots, and then they put me on the second half. That was... I don't think I touched the ball. I think it was just like, why am I on this pitch?
Just spur body on the field. Yeah. But what is it you get out of hurling?
I think to bring it into the music side, it's that culture that we inherently have. It's like, I love all sports kind of thing, but that one just means more, maybe because of the culture behind it.
Yeah.
It brings so much. It brings like release. It brings like even community and stuff. There's so much that you get out of the GAA in particular, not to sort of delve down that, but also just my childhood is that, like, I didn't start music till I was like, I didn't start playing in the pubs till I was allowed in the pubs, so it was all hurling up until then. So that's, it's not that I'm like standing on the pitch daydreaming about younger years kind of thing, but like there is that sort of thing about playing that sport. It's just like home a wee bit,
You never got to the stage where you had to make the choice because you were worried about the fingers?
No, to be honest, I broke my collarbone at Electric Picnic by walking, and that was one of the things of like, I could literally trip and fall and hurt myself. If I live my life by not doing the things I want to do, I'll not be living my life, So I just always went, if it happens, I'll just get an amazing guitar player to sit beside me and make a joke of it, and just as long as nobody hits me in the throat, I think I'm okay.
That's a brilliant message for all the youngsters who feel that they're forced to choose between the music or sport at a particular age because of injuries, because of what might happen, what could happen. You hear that all the time, and they tell, I was a promising banjo player or whatever, but left it behind because I wanted to go with the football or the hurling, and then vice versa. You hear that all the time.
I think at the minute though, there's a serious amount of like youngsters that are playing and doing both. Like there's a lot of teams there that have killer players, and then afterwards you're seeing videos of them, and they're also killer musicians too. So long may that continue. But you can't live your life in fear, because otherwise what are you doing?
You know that you can, even at 36, you could still enter the Fla. You're too late now because the county Fla and the Kjol are nearly over, or they're not. No, the down one's in a couple of weeks. You could still technically enter the competitions. Would that ever appeal to you?
What kind of competition?
As in to sing. You could do the singing.
I don't know.
Would you?
I would do it, but it wouldn't really be for the... I don't... singing's a weird thing where I don't find it competitive, like if it's a showcasey sort of thing, like I would enter it for sure, but I would hate at the end of it to be like given an award or like you're the best, like to
not finish. Even if you were doing it for down.
Well, actually, now that you put the colours on it, it kind of changes it. Now no, it's not about the best voice, it's about the best county. Who do I message about this?
So if I see Ram McMullen's name down now at the County Down Flag, we'll know why it happened.
Do you know what? If I did enter it and lost, I don't know if my ego could really take that. Oh, that would be. Now that I think about it, the more I think of it, I'm talking myself out of it now.
I know, because do you ever put yourself in, that competition's an interesting thing though. Do you ever put yourself in competition with other people, or is the competition just with yourself?
I think, do you know what, whenever I was starting, I was very much aware of, like, I have an ability to sing, so is there a way that I can stand out in the room? Whereas then I met someone like Foy who can sing, like, unbelievable singer, but then he sings a song that he's written and you're like, oh my God, that, it doesn't matter, like, he could be a bad singer, like Tom Waits. Whenever he lost his voice, you know, it's still a gorgeous voice, but it's the song. So for me, the competition is, like, in a weird way, it's not competitive, but is there an ability to write that kind of song? Whereas the singing thing, there's so many amazing singers in Belfast, never mind the world and whatever, but to be a competitive singer, like to be competitive about singing, I think takes away what the point of singing for me. It's like it's an expression. It's not a medal, you know.
Here we go. We'll not see you. We'll not see you on a sheet anytime soon. I don't think, Ryan.
No, I don't think so.
Oh no, you do enough. You do more than enough to make yourself, your family, and your county proud. And no doubt these 2 nights are going to be so memorable.
Yeah.
And you might not be putting them on TikTok, but I'm sure most people in the audience will.
I hope they do. They'd be doing my job for me.
That would be
unbelievable. I can remember I used to do that on Instagram, being like, oh, people keep putting up videos of me, and now I'm like, I wish people would put videos up with me so I don't have to.
There you go. Anybody listening now, do the videos for Ryan. Just please do the videos.
Yeah.
Just save the man the pain.
Yeah.
Well, come here. Have a brilliant fla. All the best for the 2 gigs, and thanks a million for coming in and chatting to us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Cousin one, Arthur McBride, as we went to walking down by the seaside. Now mark what did follow and what did betide, for it being on Christmas morning. Out for recreation we went on a tram, and we met Sergeant Napper and Corporal Vam, and a little wee drummer intending to camp, for the day being pleasant and charming. Well, good morning, the sergeant did cry, and the same to you, gentlemen, we did reply, intending no harm, but meant to pass by, for it being on Christmas morning. But says he, my fine fellows, if you will enlist, it's 10 guineas of gold I shall slip in your fist, and a crown in the bargain for to kick up the dust and drink the king's health in the morning. For the sergeant, he leads a very fine life, and he always is blessed with a charming young wife, and he pays all his debts without sorrow or strife, and always is pleasant and charming. And for a soldier, he always is decent and clean, in the finest of clothing he's constantly seen, while other poor fellows grow dirty and mean, and sup on thin